How's it going, everyone? I didn't really film like a formal video this week, so I kind of just thought I'd make another car vlog and keep making updates. And this past weekend I was supposed to go to California and do a medical school interview, and then I ended up canceling, which is kind of what's prompting me to kind of make a quick video talking about canceling medical school interviews and how to make sure you're making the right choices when you are, going on these interviews. And so I actually did go to California. I visited a friend, but I was driving there, and the entire time I was driving there, I just I kind of just had this feeling of not being too excited. I wasn't super stoked for the interview, which felt very uncharacteristic of myself compared to what other interviews in the past has felt like. Usually when I go on interviews, I'm pretty excited, I'm pretty stoked, and I'm usually pretty energetic about it. But while I was driving to California the whole way, I was driving to visit a friend, and the plan was the next day, drive north to go to the place that I was going to interview at, wake up the next morning on Monday and interview, then drive 6 hours home back to Las Vegas. And the entire drive there, I just was really not looking forward to it. I was kind of bummed that I was even driving. I felt like it was a waste of time, and medical school interviews aren't a waste of time, but I felt like this interview for me was, because I have gone into 2 schools at this point, and I just had this gut feeling that even if I got into this school, I wasn't going to end up choosing it over either the schools that I got into, or I'm still waiting to hear back from 3 in-state schools, and if I get into any of those, I know for sure I'll be going to a school in-state, or I have a few other interviews coming up, which most of them I think I would have chosen over this school if I got into it. And so the entire time I was there, I just had this gut feeling that I really didn't want to interview, and it was just bugging me, and it was the whole drive there, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I got there, and I met up with my friend, and then I kind of just had this moment where I was like, you know what? I know it's 2 days before, but I'm going to cancel the interview. And, I've been asked a couple times about oh, you're canceling interviews? That's kind of crazy. And it is kind of crazy to cancel a medical school interview. If you had asked me maybe a year ago, or not even a year ago, maybe 2 months ago, would I cancel a medical school interview? Or if you had told me that I would be canceling interviews, I think I've actually canceled 4 up to this point, but this is the closest to the interview that I've ever canceled, actually driven there and then decided to cancel. I would have thought you were crazy, because I would have been no, you have to cherish every interview you get. And you do, because every interview you get, there's thousands of applicants out there that would love to have that interview and would be so happy to be in that position. But as the person in that position, it's important to also make sure you're going to interview at schools that you value. And I applied pretty broadly, and I wasn't expecting to get as many interviews as I did. That's why I applied so broadly. I'm sitting at 12 interviews. I got another one this morning, and I'm so grateful about it. But just because you get interviews doesn't mean you have to go on them. And it's kind of a weird thing to say. And I'm sure that there's other people out there that are going to be you're crazy, go on your interviews, it's such a big deal. And it is such a big deal. And if you get interviews, you should be so stoked. But it's important to really think about, your future, and make sure that you're going to interview at schools that are right for you and that you truly believe that you might want to go to. And I know it's easier said than I know it's easier to say that when you have an acceptance, and I definitely think that if I had no acceptances to any schools, I probably would have committed to that interview and gone on it. But once you get your medical school interviews, it's such an awesome feeling to be able to kind of triage your interviews a bit better, and to choose more selectively of where you're going to end up actually interviewing at. And I've canceled 4 interviews now. I'm pretty sure that was my 4th one that I've canceled. And it's a good feeling. And if you're applying to medical school, apply depending on your stats, apply broadly enough that you can cancel interviews, because it's such a good feeling to know that I can be more selective, and I'm so happy to be at this point in the process. And I'm very grateful to have made it this far in the process to where I have acceptances and I have interviews and I can cancel these interviews and I can be so selective. And so something was like really like eating at me. And, everyone that I was kind of talking to on the way to California and my friend in California, they could, they knew how I was feeling. I even like called my mom and told her I just really I didn't want to go, and I'd already driven to California. But the whole drive home, even though it was kind of a, waste of time, I was pretty grateful that I canceled it, because, I knew that I need to be more selective and really, save my time and money and interview at schools that, I have good feelings about. And that was kind of a lesson. I applied very broadly, and even though you should apply broadly depending on your stats, also make sure that you interview at schools that you're going to be stoked about, or you apply for schools that you're going to be stoked about interviewing at, because, to cancel these interviews, it's kind of a waste of time and kind of a waste of all the, the money for the applications, but it's also hindsight, and, everyone's going to look back on things and you can't do everything perfectly. So, hindsight's 2020. Like I said, I'd probably have a different perspective if I had no acceptances. But, I definitely think it's better to have and not need than to need and not have. And so I am glad that I applied very broadly to get more interviews than I actually necessarily need, and to schools I don't necessarily want to interview at, because having that ability to select is a more calming feeling, especially in a process as stressful as applying to med school. Compared to having no interviews or having a limited amount of interviews or no acceptances. So anyway, that's kind of my rant on that. Yeah, I got another interview this morning. Super stoked. It's in Arizona, and it's actually not till February, which is awesome, because I'm going to find out from my state schools sometime this year, next month, and the month after. And say I get into none of my state schools, which would be a bummer, then I can be selective about that interview. So I'm really excited. I have 5 interviews coming up scheduled, and I'm pretty stoked about a few of them. And if I get into a state school, then sometime in the next 2 months, then I'll pretty much be done. I think I'll just stop interviewing and I'll be done with my decision. So I'm excited to make that decision. Man, I don't know. Like there's like this big calm before the storm, and I talked about it in my vlog from last week. It's such a calming time, but knowing that medical school starts next year, it's pretty nuts. And even though like I'm going to work, I love the oncology clinic. I just started working at these last few weeks. It's so nice to know that there's something in the future that, this job has a deadline or an expiration date, and then I'll move on to the next phase, and that's going to be medical school. It's so calming, because I feel like I can kind of do whatever I want, knowing that something, is starting for me next year. And it's awesome. And, if you're applying to med school, or if you're thinking about applying to med school, like, you will eventually get to the position that I'm currently sitting in. I promise. If you just, work hard and you try hard and, kind of future-proof yourself a little bit. It's an awesome position, and I'm so glad to be sitting where I'm sitting. And if you had told me 2 months ago, when I was super stressed out, like this past summer, doing all my applications, or a year ago when I was doing my prereqs or preparing for the MCAT and stuff, that I would be sitting in this position, I would have been a lot more stress-free during that time. And if you're in that stressful time right now, just think that eventually you'll be in a position where you're in a med school and you can relax, knowing that your future is kind of going to be paved for you. So that's it for this week's vlog. I'll try to do a couple more formal videos in the next couple weeks about actual pre-med topics. And I'll probably keep these vlogs going, because I kind of like how simple it is to kind of just talk to the camera a little bit more organically. So yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.